On side A of this tape is a presentation by 96-year-old Florida native Laura Elizabeth Smith Hyat. It was recorded at the Marine Resources Council Brown Bag Lunch on June 28, 1996 in Grant. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
So we'll be able to hear her, and it's a good thing with that generator going. This is a loaner, a staff person in the office, so we still are trying to get one of our own. A couple of them now, before I introduce Laura. How many of you know that the Olympic torch is going right through this street Saturday? Oh, good. So, yes, next Saturday. Next Saturday. Going right through US 1, right here between 5 and 9. Yes. Actually, yeah. Okay. I have schedules for next month, so we'll try to pass it out and make sure you don't leave town late. Now, today we have somebody really special. Laura Hyat. She's been living on this lagoon for 96 years. Almost. October 15th, so we'll have to have a party. 1990. Now, Laura, something special happened to Laura last year, and she's extremely proud of it. And in fact, her son tells me it made worldwide news. She got her high school diploma. And from what I understand, it came about through events that happened at the last lunch that she was at here. Somebody asked her if she regretted anything in her life, and she replied not having a diploma, and that set the wheels in motion. Her son helped a lot to make sure that she didn't regret anything. So anyway, I think that's kind of what she wants to talk about today, is how she got educated that long ago in this area when there was so few people. Okay, I'm gonna quit hogging this and let her speak.
Hold it for you?
Thank you. I don't know. I'm going to read some. Want me to start?
Yes.
My name is Laura Elizabeth Hyat, and my parents were Robert Toombs Smith and Elizabeth Wells Smith. My father was born in a log cabin in Georgia, in southwest Georgia, in 1863. He and one of his brothers decided they wanted to come to Florida and find a place where they could grow things better on their farm. So they longed for a better place, and they came to Florida, and they came in a horse and wagon. And it took them about 6 weeks to travel in a horse and wagon down here to Florida, where they landed at Grant. Across the river from Grant is where they really settled, on Mullet Creek, which is just straight across the river from Grant. And they began to whack and to cut trees down and clear the land, and kept on till they got some place where they could farm, because they didn't want to live here without having their own garden and live like they wanted to live. They had to make a garden and have things to do, to eat. And there was no school over there where we lived. After father and mother married, they went over across the river to a place called Mullet Creek. There's a creek there by the name of Mullet Creek. And so my mother decided after she had 2 children, my oldest brother and I, that she would go to the school and get some books and teach the children herself. She was not a school teacher, but it worried her because she couldn't get her children to school. The only way of travel would be to them to get in a rowboat and row across the river, or my father had a sailboat to sail across the river to where he could get to school. So my mother taught us. She painted blackboards for we 3 older children, 3 blackboards on the wall. And every evening after we had what we call supper, we had to go in that room and learn our ABCs and our 1, 2, 3s. So they said she did a very good job when we did get into school. We moved to Grant in 1910. I was 10 years old that year. I was born in 1900, and started to school. And we always had just a few children, not too many pupils in the school, because we went to school in the summertime. A lot of the farmers raised vegetables, such as string beans, and they had to gather them and ship them in the wintertime, ship them up north. So they had to have their children in the wintertime to help them pick the beans. There was not anyone around to hire to do things like that, so they waited until their children could help the farm, on the farm. So that's the way it was. So we decided in 1910 we'd move to Grant. My father went into a mercantile business with another man. He bought his interest out, this other man's interest, so had this store. And you know, that was a good thing because I learned how to count money and how to wait on customers to help my mother. We run the store business, my father and my mother and me children. My father run the farm across the river. Well, if he had something good to sell, like a big watermelon in the summertime, he'd come up the hill with one in a cooker sack, and we'd sell his watermelon for him. We didn't eat what we didn't eat. But it was good living. We enjoyed living outdoors, and the mosquitoes, they were terrible. So in the summer, we couldn't stay outside very much. We had to get in the house, away from the mosquitoes. And if they got bad in the house, we had a kind of insect powder called Persian insect powder. We burned some of that after closing windows and doors in the sleeping room where we were going to sleep. So it was pretty different kind of life, what we were accustomed to, of course, but we lived all right. We didn't let the mosquitoes eat us up. After we went into the room and we didn't hear any mosquitoes singing, then they would open the windows and doors, let the fresh air come in, and after a bit they'd go in and go to bed. But over that bed, my mother made a mosquito net, mosquito bar. It took about 20 yards of very good cheesecloth, which was built around the bed, the size of the bed, and hung down to the floor. But the top of it, she used unbleached muslin, and it had strings tied to the top of the room. So that kept us from mosquitoes. Once in a while, one would get in and sing inside the net, but we'd kill him or get rid of him pretty quick. But that's the way we had to live. So we moved to Grant, and I went into the store business, my mother and my children. And it was a good thing for us because we had learned how to count and spell and do some of the things you learn in school. But that helped me I remember I learned how to count money, and I remember we had some silver dollars in the money drawer back in those days. I don't think you see those anymore. It was a different life, but we were learning and at school, and we were happy to be able to go to school. Are there any questions about this?
How'd you dress?
Oh, I used navy blue skirts a lot when I went to high school, and midi blouses, That's the way the girls dressed back in those days. We just wore common clothes. We didn't dress up a lot to go to school. We had recess in the daytime. In the morning we had recess, and after we came in from recess, the teacher would say, wash your hands and dry them well. Get out your copybooks out of your desk. We always kept our copybooks. And we had to copy what was written up above or typed up there. And I think that helped all of us. And I think they should have that again today, because so many people just scribble. You can't read their writing.
That's right.
And I don't want to be bragging or anything, but I think you can read mine. I always try. And I had a lot of practice. But that's the way it was about that.
Where was the school located?
It was in Grant, up on, did you know where Bob Orman lived? Well, that's where it was located.
The house still stands.
It was a one-room school, and there were usually, we were over half the school sometimes. There were 3 or 4 Smiths and a few more. Not very many people there in those days to go to school, children. But we enjoyed having a school to go to, and we tried to learn all we could. But when I got ready to go to Melbourne High School, there was no way to get me to Melbourne High School. So my folks let me live in Cocoa with some friends up there, boarded up there, and went to school there that year. But the last year I went to school in Grant was when I was in the 10th, no, this was in Melbourne High School. I finished the 8th grade in Grant, and I finished the 10th in Melbourne. We had a deputy sheriff who was a bus driver for our Model T that we rode to school in. And he always carried a gun because he was a deputy sheriff, and many times he'd see a rattlesnake crawling across the Dixie Road, get out and shoot him, put him on the running board of the Model T, and carry him home and skin him. I guess he sold the skins, maybe. They made belts or something out of something. That's the way that was. One day we were going along and on the road, and all the kids in the little homemade trailer, we picked up a trailer in Melbourne. I was the only one going from Grant School at that time. We picked up one girl, Gladys Widias, at Valcario, 3 miles up the road, and then 3 more miles at Malabar. We picked up a little homemade trailer with a few children in that. But it took us about an hour to go those few miles to Melbourne, 12 miles to Grant, because the roads were bad and you wouldn't want to get off the road. You'd get stuck in the sand, get pulled out or something. With someone to help you get out of that. But that was all we knew about going to school. I mean, that was just the way it was. We had to do as we said. Our first teacher was Ada Comstock, and she came from Malabar. Malabar was 6 miles north of Grant, and she boarded with a family in Grant while she was teaching there. My father made arrangements with the Brevard County School Board to have school for his children in the summertime, so he could have his children pick string beans for him in the wintertime. It seems like most of the farmers raised string beans to ship because they shipped well. They were not perishable like some other vegetables. So he made arrangements with the school to have us go to school in the summertime and help him in the wintertime. There were only a few pupils in the school, and the teacher always read from the Holy Bible and had prayer. And usually this was followed by a song or two. One song I remember was the old oaken bucket, the old iron bucket, the covered bucket that hung in the well. And that's the way it was. And we drank water from a water pail, which was on a bench in the east end of the room, not far from the door. And there was a dipper in that pail of water, and everyone drank from the same dipper. And we had 15 minutes recess in the morning and 15 in the afternoon. And we had to take our copybooks out, I was told that. And one teacher lived in Malabar. Her name was Lena Arnold. I think some of the Arnolds are still around somewhere in Florida. And if it was raining, she rode in a buggy. She hitched her horse up to a buggy. But if it was nice weather, not raining or bad weather, she would ride horseback. And we even thought that was something. She rode 6 miles to get to school. Then our next teacher came from Titusville. Her name was Jeanette Norwood. And she boarded with a family in Grant. And then we had Miss Clara Christensen, who lived not far from the school. And she could walk over to the school, and she taught us. Spelling was one of my favorite subjects in school, and I'm glad I like spelling because I see so many people writing and can't spell the words. And I just like to study and learn those words. I wrote them 10 times on the blackboard. Well, the teacher or someone told me if you write them 10 times, you'll know how to spell those words. And I found out that was true. We ran home for lunch. We didn't live very far from the school, and we'd get back early. So the teacher one day said, if you girls, there were only 3 older girls, but get you a crochet hook and a ball of crochet thread. I'll teach you how to crochet at noon hour. So she did. And I've been crocheting for many years since. I've always enjoyed it. Then I learned how to make tatting. I like to be busy with my fingers like that. I never was much for society going out, but then I belonged to the Extension Homemakers over 50 years, and I'm proud to say that I learned a lot from that. And then I'm a life member of the Florida Federation of Garden Clubs. We'd have flower shows every year in Melbourne, and I always helped out, set up the flowers, and won some prizes. One year I won a blue ribbon for the best flower in the show. Someone gave me a small tree. It was called Erythrina cristagalli. And it has beautiful red flowers, shaped like sweet peas almost, but they're a bright red. And no one around seems to have one except me, and I'm very proud of that. Some people come get cuttings. I don't think the cuttings take root very well, though, but they try anyway. Are there any questions?
Mother. Now that you have your high school diploma, do you plan to go on to college?
Thank you.
Got a question here.
Yeah, tell us about the first time you rode in a car.
Well, we had this store. One time there was a salesman. He was selling groceries from Bacon Homes in Jacksonville, wholesale place. And I don't know whether my mother asked him to take we children in his car for the first ride we ever had or not, but we rode down as far as the Showmill. Must have been about a mile and a half or something. Boy, we didn't want to get out of that car. We enjoyed it so much. It was wonderful.
You want me to hold this?
I'm sorry.
You want me to hold it?
Well, if you want to.
can't
Am I
hear you.
doing all right?
Oh, yeah, they just can't hear it.
Well, you know, time goes on, and we decided we'd move. Well, first I got married. I met my husband. He was a fisherman. And I asked him, we were down at the dock, the fish dock, waiting for some people to come in trucks from O'Galley to pick up some field boxes of citrus fruit, which my father had brought over from his grapefruit grove. Because if you didn't watch it, people would go and take out some of them. They're all open on top, and it'd spoil the price of the food. So we watched the fruit for him, and while I was down there, my husband, he was later, and his brother came in from fishing because we had what we call a norther, heavy wind blowing from the north, and they decided it wouldn't be a good night for fishing. So he came home early, and so he said to me, would you like, I'll take you and your sister home in my car. It's out here on the dock. I said, well, I guess that'll be all right. So we made a date that night, but after we got to my home, I talked to him a little while, and he said, how about going to movies sometimes with me? And would you like to go some night that I don't go fishing? Whenever the weather's bad, we don't go fishing. So I said, well, I guess so. And it was almost Christmas time. They had a Christmas program band for a theater. So that was our first date. And I asked him right away. I said, do you smoke cigarettes? Do you drink beer, wine, and whiskey? Oh, no. I said, well, you're different. I never met anybody like that before. I guess I made me want to like him pretty well, you know.
How old were you?
I was in my 20s when I married him. I didn't ever intend to get married, I don't think, because I was the oldest of 8 children. I had to help take care of them, and I guess I had enough of that. Anyway, that's the way it was. So we just knew each other for quite a while, and we got married. And I have a daughter. She was a school teacher for a while. She went to Brevard Community College. And she was a graduate first from Florida State University in Tallahassee. And she married a man there from Panama. He was the youngest teacher in the University of Panama, now gone. And they got married after about a year. But she went down there later, and he was not so good to her. He was better to his own people. So I remember my father always told her, said, you want to be careful who you marry. You don't want to marry any of these foreigners. They're not like Americans. So she came home, went to work at Banana River Naval Air Station at that time, and I kept her 2 children. She had 2 little girls with that time. So one of my granddaughters is the youngest teacher in Syracuse, New York University. She has recently returned from Jerusalem, where she had a free trip. She is a lecturer. She has lectured in different parts of Europe. So I'm very proud that I raised her, and I'm proud of the things that she's doing. And I think, you know, if you want to do something, you can do it, if you make up your mind. You try to do right always. Be good to people, and people will be good to you. Any questions?
Over here.
Do you remember if Sebastian Inlet was open
Oh, yes.
at the time? Or was it closed and opened up later on?
My brothers, Chauner and John Smith, helped to open it, and it kept closing. That was in the beginning, when they were trying to keep it open. Mr. Couch, R.O. Couch, he died down there on his boat. He was very much interested in the inlet and did a lot to get it to be a success. I never learned to swim because Mother wouldn't let us go in Muddle Creek. It was so muddy. You couldn't see the bottom, and there were stingrays in there. We had a friend, Mr. Morse, came over from Grant, and he was wading and pulling his seine in the water, and it was muddy down there in the bottom of the river, and he stepped on a stingray. Well, he came running up to our house, and my mother and father did what they could for him, but he always limped. He had to walk on his toe at one foot. But they're very dangerous. They have thorns or stickers on the stinger. It goes in your foot easily or whatever you're stepping on, and when you start to pull it out, it brings the flesh too. You know, it's a horrible thing. But we have things here that are not good in Florida, but most of the things are good, I think.
Okay, over there.
How did you deal with the mosquitoes back in the,
What do you say?
How'd you deal with the mosquitoes?
Well, I tell you, we had to stay in the house when we were small. My mother didn't want us to get bitten by the mosquitoes, so we stayed in the house in the summertime. We had a mosquito brush made from the palm frond, the cabbage palmettos. Before it buds out, it gets to be a big fan, like strip it up and had always a brush by the door. And we had Persian insect powder we burned to kill them. You had to fight them. You couldn't just let them go anyway, you know.
What's Persian insect powder?
Huh?
What is Persian insect powder?
Well, I don't know whether you could even know what it is today. I never hear of it. I don't know. But it was brown looking. And we take a container with some sand in the bottom and put some of that on top and light it and close up your windows and doors in your bedroom where you were going to go to sleep. And it'd kill them all. And you didn't go in there and not hear them singing, and you knew you had them all dead. But the sand flies, they raised in the sand along the shore. They were worse than the mosquitoes. You couldn't see them, but you could really feel them.
No see 'em. There's a question over here.
Remember do you remember the old Malabar mail boat, Doc?
No, that's before my time, I think.
Oh, nothing that.
They used to have trade boats, and on these trade boats, people would come from the shore in a boat and go out to the trade boats to buy things. And my mother was from the state of Missouri, and she never had eaten any grits until she bought some from the trade boat. And one of our favorite dishes to eat for breakfast was fish and grits. The fishermen would fish all night, and on the way home, on the boat, they'd clean the fish and bring them home. Fish and grits, a cracker dish.
Back here.
Hello.
She wants you to say
Again?
Can you recite prayer and potatoes? And she called you Aunt Laura.
That's Barbara.
Oh, that's good.
Prayer and potatoes.
I've got one here I think I was going to give you. I think it's in here.
I want to ask how many of you here are relatives of Laura's? So many of you came up, just an old friend. Okay.
I have one here, not that one, but I have one that I've memorized on them. Farmer Jones on women's rights. Farmer Jones rode into town to carry a load of produce down. He stopped at a country store which he had supplied many years or more. He hitched his team and began to mutter as he took out his baskets of eggs and butter. I hope Betsy wrote their errands down. Always sure to get 'em when they go to town. Well, Farmer Jones of the grocer's salute as he whetted his knife on the sole of his boot. I'm pretty well. How are you today? And what is the best-selling price for hay? One question at once, the farmer said as he took his bandana and mopped his head. I've heard no news, but tell us, neighbor, what's the news? Then you haven't heard the news, said Grocer Brown. There's a woman a-coming to town. She wants to get all the women she can to follow suit, go to the polls, and they'll just get their names up and ruin their souls. You'll be sure, said the farmer, before it does harm. Like's not Betsy'll want to rule the farm. By this time, Farmer Jones's trade was completed. So with his bundles and bills all receipted, he spoke to the mare, bid her to come, picked up the reins, and went jogging home. At the door, Betsy met him and asked for shoes, but Jones's mind was overflowed with news, and not until Betsy the table had spread and taken her place in the seat at the head did he give full vent to his great irritation and gave his mixed thoughts a free circulation. Well, Betsy said as he sat down, I heard some strange news today in town. It fairly makes my blood run cold to think that the women are getting so bold. There's a woman's rider, a woman a-coming here, and she wants to get all the rights she can. Follow suit, go to the polls, or just get their names up and rule their souls. By this time, Betsy, the table had spread, and taking her place in the seat at the head, came through a bit of great irritation and gave her mixed thoughts to free circulation. Well, and just going to hear her, I don't see no harm. Perhaps she don't want to be a man. Wants to get all the rights she can. I understand this new reform, and I'm going to hear her shine her storm. Moses, he raved about, threatened before she should go out, he shut her up in the chicken coop. But Betsy never budged a loop. Now 40 years with him hadn't proved all roses, and Betsy thought by this time she'd manage a move. So to the Women's Rights Convention when Grocer Brown asked him, why he let her? Well, Betsy was just so soft, I thought I'd better. I'd like to recite the first Christmas poem I ever learned. The teacher would give us poems to learn. This was when I was about 10 years old, and I keep reciting it so I never forget it. The Christmas day had ended, and by the fireside bright, in Mama's lap sat Dorothy in her little night-dress white. She laid by books and playthings, but still in fond embrace, she hugged her Christmas dolly with lovely waxen face. She said, I am so happy, don't you wish, Dolly dear, that Christmas day came oftener, say 2-3 times a year? Then Mother told her darling in her sweet and gentle way, why we love and all keep Christmas, our dear Lord Christ's birthday. Then kneeling for her prayer, she scarce had breathed amen, when a sweet thought came to her, and down she knelt again. Clasped her hands and looking upward, said in a reverential way, Jesus dear, I wish you many glad returns of your birthday. It's not Christmas. It's not Christmas, but I think.
Should we do Uncle John?
And Charners.
Oh, little Johnny.
Three old bad
Johnny
boys.
was busy one day with a pen and some paper and ink, and his face looked anxious and sad as he tried very hard to think. What's the matter with my little man? His mother then tenderly said. Why, he's writing a letter to Santa to bring me a wagon that's red. And I'd like to know where to tell him please to put it, for it's time for the letter to go. Oh, now I know, dear Santa. Please bring me a wagon that's red. If the wagon won't go in the stocking, keep the stocking in the wagon instead. And one my older brother, Charner, had to recite was, 3 bad little boys kept wide awake once on a Christmas Eve. Their mothers took them up in bed and kissed and covered each curly head. We'll just play make-believe. We'll wait and watch for Santa Claus. We won't make any noise. We'll see him drop from the chimney top, said these wicked little boys. Then the house grew lonely, dark and still, and the fire died in the grate, and the wind that over the chimney blew wailed like a witch had said, you are sitting up too late. The clothes in the corner looked like ghosts with the shadows over them shed. But the one that screamed couldn't speak, and they heard the stairs go creakety-creak like the goblins were going to bed. Then down the chimney came Santa Claus, fresh from his snowy sleigh, but all together they screamed so loud that they frightened him away. I helped my brothers learn their 2 speeches. And I've been selling chlorine salve. That was a wonderful salve. It was good for most everything. It came in a tin box. We sold it for 25 cents a box. And I sold a lot of it. So I won a doll, a beautiful, about 14-inch doll in the doll carriage. So we stood in front of the Christmas tree up at the old hotel there in Grand. It was called the Ridgeland House, and recited our poems. The teacher gave us each a poem to recite. And I keep reciting them so I don't forget them.
Do you have a question?
Any questions?
Shelley.
Did you ever get to Indian River County or Sebastian, and what did it look like?
When you were younger, did you ever get to Sebastian area and Indian River County, and what did it look like back then?
Well, we never traveled a lot. We'd go to Melbourne on the train, but I don't remember going to Sebastian too much then. But my father played the fiddle, and they'd have a parade, you know, and they'd have a truck with my father and some other musicians on the truck. He never knew a note. He and there were four other brothers, five of them all just played music without any lessons or anything, just born musicians. He played the fiddle, he called it, and I have one of his fiddles, but I don't play it. I wish I did. But they were from a very musical family. His brother that came to Florida with him played the big bass violin. Stood up to play it. But we all like music, and I like to dance. And a friend of mine taught me how to waltz, and that was one of my favorite dances, waltzing. And I liked that song "Over the Waves." Was one of the songs we liked. Any questions?
More questions? Okay, Rose.
Did your father come down here after the Civil War?
Did your father come down after the Civil War?
His father, my father's father, was fighting in the Civil War when my father was born in 1863. Well, the last battle they were in was west of Jacksonville, and he wanted to get home and see his new baby, so he began to walk. He started walking, and they said, "Oh, we'll furnish you a way to ride." Oh, he said, "I'm in a hurry to get home, so I'm going on home, walking." And when he got home, he knocked at his home door, and his wife didn't know him. And he knew that she wouldn't know him because he looked so bedraggled. His hair was growing out in his face, I guess, with terrible. Couldn't wash it, probably on the road, and had a terrible time. But he got into the home and to the door, knocked at the door, and his wife didn't know him. He said he wasn't surprised that she didn't know him. He said, "Don't you know me, honey?" Well, he had been through the war, and I guess he looked pretty bad. But he said to his little boy, who was a baby, he said, "I'm going to give you my name, and I'm going to name you for my commanding officer." He was so good to me, so he named him Robert for himself, and he named him Toombs, T-O-O-M-B-S. Everyone wondered where he got that name. His commanding officers was Colonel Toombs. I think he said Colonel Toombs. But anyhow, that's the way he got the name. Any more questions?
Did you ever see snow in Florida?
Did you ever see snow in Florida?
They have had some few, a little bit of snow in Jacksonville, some places like that up north of Florida, but I've never seen any. I saw my first snow in Bristol, Virginia in 1925. I was up there and it snowed the latter part of October. We'd been to a Halloween party when we got home. Next day it melted. The snow was on the roof, but it soon melted. But I thought it was beautiful. I held my mouth open to get some of it in.
Yeah, you've been here for a while, quite a while, and you're a great person. You've seen a lot of changes. What do you think about these changes? Are they good or bad?
Well, some of them are good and some of them are bad. But I think it's wonderful to live in Florida and see the changes come. We're glad to have people come into Florida, nicer people, but now we have all kinds. Some of them are not so good. We had 2 murders in around Palm Bay, or Grant it was then. I was thinking about Palm Bay. The old Mr. Jorgensen had a store, and that store is still up here. The Swaggers had it, and I don't know who has it now. But this man lived alone about 2.5 miles up the road near Valkyria. He'd come down and shop at our store some. We were next door to this post office store, in our store. And he'd sometimes stay. My mother invited him to eat supper with us, but we never thought he was too strange. He didn't know he was going to do any harm to anyone. But he waylaid this old man that had the store, Mr. Jorgensen, and he shot him and killed him. And we had, in those days, we had a suction crew on the railroad to keep it up, the railroad tracks, because it was all sand. They didn't have gravel. They didn't have rocks to hold the ties in place and all. So this section crew came along and they saw this mule stopped and hitched up to a wagon right over and a few feet from the railroad track was the old Dixie Highway. So I went over and found out that this man was killed or dead. He was on the ground. So some of them stayed there and then went on down to Grant to notify people. But that was a big trial, and a lot of people from Grant went to the trial here in the county, and then it went to the United States Supreme Court, and they pardoned this man. But later he did something else, and they got him for good, we heard. And then there was an old man lived alone quite a bit of the time. He was a good old man. Everybody loved him. He never did any harm to anyone. And his name was the same as ours, Smith, but his initials were L.K. Smith, and he was a bee man. He liked honeybees, and he had bees, and he got the honey so that he could sell it to people. And he was known, a lot of people called him the honey man. Well, one night he had a habit of sitting by his living room window, and he'd fallen asleep, they thought. And he heard a knock at the door. He went to the door, and this man had been stealing some of their chickens. And he killed them and put them in a cooker sack later. And so anyway, he shot Mr. Smith, and they had to bury him that same day because he was in such a condition. They just shot him in the forehead, I think. My brothers went down to where he was. But he lived right near the river shore there. And he never did anyone any harm. Everyone loved him, thought a lot of him. We'd go down to see him sometimes, we children, and he'd give us a saucer and a teaspoon with honey in the saucer. And we never had any bread or any water to drink or anything, just that honey. And I remember how sweet it always was, but we liked him for what he did for us. But anyway, they got the Negro man. Oh, his wife was in another room where she slept, and he'd built a porch out to where her room was. She was a person that didn't want to live with her husband for a while, quite a while, and she lived in what they called the honey house. And she just had a pallet on the floor, and just, that was her way of doing, sleeping there. Well, anyway, that night she was living in that room he had built for her, and there was a porch going out to that. And she said, well, I heard that shot, and I know that he killed L.K., that was her husband, initials. And I just know that because I don't hear his voice anymore. The last I heard was he said, oh, 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 3 times. And so he's going to be coming for me next. I know he will be. And it was in the moonlight night. And sure enough, he came, and she had a .22 with one shell in it, they said. And she got it inside where he couldn't see her and him outside. And she shot. She didn't know that she killed him. But she did. He ran a few feet, and they found him the next day. So there were 2 dead people in that yard, L.K. Smith. But that was some of the terrible tragedy that happened in Grant.
I have a question.
Did you ever eat manatee?
Yes, we did. I guess my father or some of the boys or somebody killed them. We just ate the part of the tail. There was always a law against it, but they didn't enforce it. Just like sea turtles, it was against the law killing them back in the old days. But we ate that, and if you got one that wasn't too old, the meat was nice and tender, you know.
Did you have a question?
Laura, who's that man with you that looks like Doc?
Did you hear Richard?
She said, who's that man with you that looks like Doc?
That's my son, my only son. He's a picture of his daddy. And I'm glad he is. Now, is this time for me to stop talking?
No, you got a few more minutes. Is anybody, okay.
If you got sick, where was the nearest hospital?
If you got sick, where was the nearest hospital?
Well, I never was in the hospital in my life. I tell you, we lived on a farm. We had good fruits and vegetables, and my mother was a wonderful cook. And we children were healthy. About the only thing we ever had was a bad cold once in a while. But it wasn't like it is today. There weren't a lot of people coming into the schools. When they began to come into the school, they got whooping cough and other things. But we had something called vapopressline. There was a little lamp. You put it in a little at the top, and the fumes from it would help you. So
Yeah.
you remember, or you ever know about it?
Yeah, we do that.
Wonderful. And for cold, my mother would take a piece of white bacon, sew it on a strip of white cloth, and put some salt on it if it wasn't too salty. Anyway, put it around our neck for a sore throat. Next morning, the sore throat's gone. You haven't got it.
You gotta remember that.
Simple remedies, the best thing. You don't have to go to the store and buy something all the time. There wasn't any stores close by anyway.
Bacon and salt. Huh. Okay.
Any experiences or stories about the Indians, native Indians?
Did you ever run into any Indians?
Well, no, only when we went to Vero Beach sometimes. We would see Indians on the street in their colorful costumes. They always amused me. I like the Indians. I think if you're good to the Indians, they'll be good to you. You know, when my father came here, one of the Indians, there were Indians here, died. He passed away. And they buried him. The Indians buried him. And some white man went there and removed his canoe. They turned his canoe upside down over his grave. And the white man took it away, and they almost had a war over that before they got it back. But wasn't that terrible for people to do that to the Indians?
Yeah.
They'll be good to you if you're good to them.
Come down and wish her a birthday and have cake and punch, and it'll just be a discussion. If you want next week, we're going to draw who gets the birdhouse now. You want to take a ticket? Everybody got a lucky ticket? Wow. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay. 038691.